Hi, and welcome to my channel. I like to take my little corner of the universe, well, the YouTube universe, to talk about different knitting, crocheting, or machine knitting tactics that I use to make knitting patterns a little bit easier for me to use in general. I am a 38-year-old incomplete paraplegic. I use a wheelchair full-time as of now. Before, I would use a walker, and believe it or not, using a mobility aid caused me to have to modify patterns a little bit more than the wheelchair. One thing you might not think of naturally that somebody with a mobility issue would need would be pockets, right? Whenever I was using my walker, I would not be able to carry my phone unless I had pockets. So it's just those little things, the little nuggets of information that I like to pass along just in case, you're curious, or perhaps you know somebody who uses a mobility aid, a wheelchair, or has another issue that you might want to take into consideration if you're going to knit them something. My name is Mandy Vaughn. I am known as Mandy Vaughn Knits on YouTube, Ravelry, and Instagram. You can take a look at my page to see different items that I've knit. I'm pretty much modeling all of them in a wheelchair because unfortunately that's my pose. I'm gonna, trademark that one, but it's pretty hard for me to pose in new and exciting ways, but hopefully you'll be able to see some of the different sweaters that I've knit and at least get an idea of what I'm talking about when we go through the patterns that I've done. Today I'm going to share 3 different sweaters with you. 2 of them are knit and 1 is machine knit. The first one is the one that I am wearing. This is knit with Blue Face Leicester. It is a Miss Babs base Cardigan. Now, the thing that I love about this yarn is that it comes in huge cakes. And you want to know something else I love about Miss Babs? You have an option when you check out with them to have them cake your yarn for a fee. For somebody like me, that is amazing because winding yarn is sometimes just too much. I've got a busy day, I've got a job, kids, working, and then trying to position my wheelchair to get the Swift set up because when you have kids, you've got clutter like all the places, and I've got to drag my Swift out, I've got to drag the ball winder out, then I have to put them onto the table, and then have somebody help me put the yarn over the Swift because I can't do it by myself. So whenever I see a dyer offering caking service for a fee, I'm all in. It's great. Anyway, this sweater is a Joji Locatelli sweater. It is Make-A-Wish. I love this. I knit this last year during the Joji Locatelli Make-A-thon. I took I'm going to say it took me a month to make. It is not a hard sweater, and you start off by casting on this shawl collar and lace. This goes all the way around the bottom, and if you look right here, it's pretty much going behind your neck, and sometimes when I put it on, I have to remember that there's no spot for my neck to go, and there's just a bunch of fabric back here. It doesn't bother me, but if you're not used to wearing it or you haven't worn it in a while, it kind of makes you do a double take. Now, I love this pattern. I did not add pockets to this one because there's not really a place to put pockets, but I consider this more of a dressy sweater, and I love how it only goes to it goes right to my butt. It's a circle skirt. I don't have to worry about accidentally sitting on it and pulling it or getting it caught in wheels if it's hanging over the side, and that's always a plus. Now, this cardigan has Joji Locatelli's signature cast on for sweaters, where she starts at the shoulders and then she works the fronts and then the back. And I love that because it makes the shoulders just a little bit more fitted. The sleeves are nice and they don't have much positive ease, but they're not super tight, but you know, I think they're just right, kind of like Goldilocks. Now, if I can hide my hand in here, I do that sometimes, but most of the time I'm pulling my sleeves back. So I feel that this length is pretty good. I would like it a little shorter. I probably should have stopped before she had said, but you win some, you lose some. Now, the lace for this cardigan was really simple. I didn't have any issues doing it. And I think looking back on the project, I believe that the lace, this part, the shawl collar, yeah, I believe that's what you would call it. The shawl collar was the longest part. You do that first. So once you cast that on and you get it done, all of a sudden it's like done. I mean, you knit the body and the sleeves and it all seems to come together after that. But honestly, this is like the best part, right? Knitting this made me super happy. When I bought the yarn, I was hoping for teal. Now, it was my own fault because I should have looked on Ravelry to possibly look at how some of the yarn color that I was buying knit up, but I was super excited because I got it for my birthday. You know what though? I ended up really liking it. It's more of an emerald green. Instead, I was going for more of a green blue instead of like a green. But all in all, I think it's great. The best part about this lace is that it's a pretty simple repeat. I believe that if you've never done lace before, you could probably do maybe a hat and then jump right into this cardigan. It's not going to give you too much difficulty, especially if you're familiar with Joji Locatelli's patterns and the way she does shoulders. But if you're not, you can always reach out and ask for help. Could leave a comment down below and I definitely help you out. Like I said, I knit this last year and I believe that it would look really nice with a dress. So I'm thinking I'm going to use it as more of a dress-up item whenever I have the opportunity. For now, I just wear it over a tank top and some leggings. I tend to stick with leggings because jeans are uncomfortable for me, as the incomplete paralysis gives me neuropathy, and it's not pleasant if jeans aggravate that. But I think that, do you want to know one thing that bothers me about this cardigan? Whenever I saw it, I fell completely in love, and then I looked at the projects and there really aren't that many. To me, it seems like one of those items that I would love to make everyone. I would love to make something like this for my daughter. She's 8 and you know, she would totally love having a pink cardigan with, like, you know, the circle skirt. It's really dancy and she loves lace and frilly and pink. And she also loves worms too, so I'm sure there's a happy medium there. But I would definitely knit this again. I really enjoy Joji's patterns. She has a tremendous size range. I can't remember offhand what her top size is, but I know that she's a very inclusive designer and has quite a bit of range in different patterns. I am going to show you my first ever machine knit garment. This was done as a craftsy class for a machine knitting class. The class, I will link it in the transition slides beforehand, but the class went over how you can take a standard pattern for a sweater, take your machine, knit a swatch, figure out what your gauge is, and then modify that pattern specifically to work with your machine and your yarn. Now, you can see that I'm still kind of a newbie-ish with the collar here. It's kind of malformed, but you know what? This was my first try, and I feel like my silver reed had quite a bit of learning curve to it. There's not a lot of places you can go to get machine knitting knowledge. At least in my experience, I'm not really able to get out to a local yarn store where I'd love to go and take part in classes, but it just doesn't work with my schedule right now. So mostly I've stuck to things like YouTube and Craftsy and just scouring Google to find answers to questions that I have. I really enjoyed making this. The best part about it was how when you were done, you felt so accomplished, and it was something that you made. You didn't, I'm trying to quantify how I'm explaining this here. You did not make the pattern, but you figured out the gauge and you figured out how you can modify it to work with your parameters. So it's not designing, but it's a lot of modification, and I really enjoyed that. Now, this yarn is super variegated, but it's sock weight. It was dyed by Woolly Mama Yarns, and it was a December club that she had, and this yarn's inspiration was an Australian robin, I believe. So if you take a look at some of the pictures that they have on Google, you can definitely see that inspiration coming through here. I'm not a big fan of variegated yarn, but I find myself really happy with how this in particular knit up on the knitting machine. I didn't get any pooling, but I had to swap yarn cakes. And this was a pain on the knitting machine. So I would go one row, the other row, swap cakes, then back and forth, just like you would do with hand knitting to where you wouldn't get pooling. And yeah, it was a labor of love, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. Just a little bit of extra oomph to make it more likable. Now, I added a crochet slip stitch around the neck because it was loose. I did make that loose. I mean, I'm still learning, so obviously I'm not going to be the best at this. It has a drop shoulder, and the sleeves are folded over, so it's double folded instead of ribbed. Same with the hem at the bottom and the collar. I believe that's where I went wrong. I've never worked with a folded down collar or really any of this before this project. So what I could do is take out this collar and just knit a rib, like by hand, and it would be fine. It wouldn't be a big deal at all. But I mean, I might do that, but I have so much yarn and so many projects, and I wear it like it is, so no harm, no foul, right? It's interesting to see how the knitting machine knits up variegated yarn one way with a certain gauge, and then I remember trying this yarn hand knitting and not liking how it turned out. So it's very interesting whenever you start working with the knitting machines and you can get the tighter gauge that is, it's possible by hand, but it's not do you know what I mean? These stitches are super even. If you look at it, you can tell it's machine knit. The one thing that I like about hand knitting is that you can tell that it's hand knit. The stitches are a little uneven in some places, at least mine. Like I've said in other videos, I'm still a beginner knitter. I've been knitting, I believe, since my daughter was 6 months old, and she's turning 8 in January. So not that long. I've been crocheting since my son was 12 years old, or since my son was 6 months old and he's 12. So I'm still a newbie crafter. I do love to learn and figure out how to improve my techniques. Like for this one, I actually have a ribber, so I could take advantage of that in a future project. Or, you know, I could just knit it by hand. I know that I could meet this gauge with sock weight yarn. And knitting a ribbing isn't that big of a deal. But I'm pretty proud of this, and I'll always remember it as, you know, my first my first machine knit garment. The one that gave me so many headaches and so many trials and tribulations. There was one time I accidentally cast like all the stitches off, or like I would drop a stitch at the very end of a row, and just now it's really finicky for me. My hands aren't great, and it's really finicky for me to try to pick up the knit stitches backwards because the purl side is facing you. So you have, normally I like to pick up, I'll turn my knitting so that I'm picking it up from the knit side. So it's just easier that way for me. But when you drop a stitch on the knitting machine, it's a little bit more finicky. But other than the collar, I really like it. I think that it was a great class to try, and that anybody looking to get knitting machine experience, the class was tailored towards, it doesn't matter what machine you have or weight yarn the machine uses, you can make the class work for you. There was another class that was just the basics of machine knitting and how to fix knitting machine mistakes, and I really appreciated these because, like I said, my husband went out and bought the knitting machine at a local yarn shop, and I could have gone with him, but sometimes it's really taxing to get out there. If you know of spoons and different ways to mark your energy, you know what I mean. But I hope that this showed you a little bit of what a garment can look like machine knit, or I don't know, maybe it just interested you a little bit. This, believe it or not, is the Radvent cardigan. Now, if you're a knitter or a crocheter or anyone who deals with things in the fiber industry, you are at least mildly aware of advents that, or countdowns that dyers do to celebrate summer, Valentine's Day, just different events within the year. Some of them do winter, different holidays, and things like that. This was knit from an advent that I got at the knitting place. I purchased it online, and I purchased it initially before the colors were revealed. So I believe right now you can go to the Knitting Place website and buy their Festival of Lights. I don't know if they still call it an advent or not, but it is their Festival of Lights advent, or it was, maybe now they're just calling it a mini skein. But this is the fade that it works up to. Now, this is the Radvent cardigan, and I modified it a whole bunch. I am a smaller person, and the Radvent cardigan has very large sleeves. That was the first thing that I knew that I had to modify if I was going to make use of this pattern. The cardigan is knit from sleeve to sleeve, and the construction is basically you're knitting one half and then you knit the other half. So it works out really well for sets of mini skeins or different colors, anything that you feel you can fade into. Now, in order to get the sleeves way more fitted, I believe that I cut the cast on number in half and then cut the increases down by 1/3. And then whenever I got up here and I had to cast on all of the sleeves through the body, I took the width of the sleeve that I had, figured out the width of the sleeve that the patterns that I should have, added that to the body, and then added more, because the next modification I had to make for the Radvent cardigan was that it's cropped. I am not a big cropped sweater or pullover, or those are the same thing, I'm sorry, garment. I don't like cropped garments on myself because I am 4'8". I'm super short, and I feel like cropped makes me seem shorter. It's a personal hang up on my end, but I'm also not very comfortable when I have to I keep pulling my shirt or my top down. I feel like it's riding up above my pants, and it bothers me, so I don't wear it. Now, this cardigan, it goes to the middle of my thigh. That's probably long, well, it's the middle of my thigh when I'm sitting. So it's probably about 3 or so inches longer than it should be, possibly even 4. I had more than enough yarn in a standard 24 skein Advent to complete it with my modifications. The next thing that I modified for this pattern was the ribbing along the neck and right here. Now, the original Radvent has ribbing and a button band, and that's fine, but whenever I made this, I was still walking around with a walker. So when I would wear cardigans that had buttons and my phone in my pocket, the phone would pull down the cardigan and unbutton it. It would drive me crazy. So for a while there, I was making modifications to all of my cardigans to have zippers instead of buttons. I still almost enjoy buttons more, or I still almost enjoy zippers more than buttons. And right now I think it's just more of a style and ease of use preference. So I can take my cardigans off without even unzipping them, just over my head. And then next time I want to wear them, I can just put them right back over without unzipping it. And I don't have to worry about any fiddly buttons if my hands are feeling sore or just not as reactive as, which they can sometimes get, you know, just kind of, I want to say sticky, but if you've ever dealt with nerve damage, I think you'll know what I mean. Sometimes you look at your hand or your leg and it feels like it's being drugged through mud when you try to use it. Now, I added an I-cord bind off around the neckline and down to the bottom. I did do ribbing on the bottom, as you can see right here. So there is some ribbing. I could have probably done it around the neck as well, but I really like how this looks and how clean and crisp it makes the edges of the cardigan. This is probably one of my favorite items to wear whenever we go to, say, like the zoo when we're walking around, because it's warm. It's superwash merino and nylon, so it's your standard sock weight. It's warm, but it's not too warm, but it keeps the wind off of you, which is a definite plus if you're always cold like me. Now, another thing that I had done whenever I modified this pattern was I took the fading sequence that is in between each stripe and just made it a little longer. Yes, I believe that's right. Or if there isn't a fading sequence in the original Radvent, I actually added one and made it pretty long. I can't remember off the top of my head. The actual pattern is pretty different from what I ended up with, so sometimes it's all kind of a blur. I remember spending probably, let's see, a month and a half just working on this and making tweaks to where it was going to be a garment that I really wanted and that I wore and that I would keep around for a long time. The colors are definitely ones that I appreciate, and I love how they fade into each other all the way down here, and then it goes back around. So the fade can go either way is what I mean. This was a beautiful dye job from the dyer, and I was just really thankful and lucky to be able to get it. And it made this beautiful garment. I actually had enough left over after this garment to make my mother a granny square bag. So she actually has a 3 granny square bag that I made that matches this cardigan. Of course, the colors are marled, so the fade isn't obvious, but I like to think that it's kind of, as my 8-year-old would say, we're twinsies. I hope that this gave a little light on different ways that you can modify this pattern, because I know that bigger sleeves and the bigger sleeves and then the big button band just isn't for everyone. And then there are some people that love the bigger sleeves and they don't like zippers. So it's really one of my favorite things of knitting is that you can totally make it your own and make it exactly how you want to wear it. And I think that's awesome.